You're watching Stewart Spotlight Podcast live with your host, William Stewart Jr. with topics of everyday life. Tune in every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. Today's guest, Dr. Okeke Inya, Associate Vice President, Federal Government Relations. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode. Now your host, William Stewart Jr. Yes, good evening, and welcome to another exciting episode of Stewart Spotlight Podcast. Once again, my name is William Stewart Jr., and I am your host this evening. Well, I hope everyone had a wonderful week, and as I stated before, getting ready for the weekend. Today is Friday, March the 21st. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we don't have that much to talk about because I want to bring my guest on because he has a lot to talk about. As just a friendly reminder, this month is celebrating Women's History Month. Make sure you tell a young lady hello. Give them a rose, give them a flower, just say hello to them. And also, do you realize yesterday, yesterday was the first day of spring? March 20th was the first day of spring. And this month is rolling by fast. I'd like to give a little shout out to a friend of mine who originally helped me out with a lot when I started Stewart Spotlight. And Sunday is her birthday. And her voice is on my birthday song. So, Nika, this is for you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear viewers. Happy birthday to you.
Yes, that is right. Happy birthday to you, Nika. Thank you for all your help and everything. And that's your own voice singing to yourself. Well, happy birthday to you. Also, it's that time. As you know, I'm always asking for assistance. So, now you're asking yourself, how could I help? Well, I'm glad you asked. I need you to do this. I need your support. I need you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and make sure you turn on your notifications. So therefore, every time you hear this, you know that Stewart Spotlight Podcast is live. That's right. Make sure you subscribe and share and leave us a comment. Give us some feedback so we can improve the guests or the show. So give us some feedback. Make sure you subscribe and share. So I'm going to take a little small break and I'm going to come back with my guest. And it's a very interesting guest this evening. I want y'all to know this. So after this break, we'll be right back. Hi, my name is William Stewart Jr. I'm the host of Stewart Spotlight Podcast. How would you like to be a guest on my show? If you have gone through something, came out of something, and just want to share it, we would love for you to be a guest to discuss any topic related to your situation. Your insight of experience, wisdom, knowledge would be invaluable to our viewers. Who knows? By sharing could help someone who may gone through what you came out of. Sharing is caring. So give us a call, 888-552-1944, so we can schedule you on the next Stewart Spotlight Podcast. That's right, sharing is caring. So give us a call. Be the next guest on my show. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest. My guest today is Dr. O.K.K. Inya, an Associate Vice President for the Federal Government Relations, who is going to be speaking on Alliance for Health Care. Let me give you some background about OK. Let me phrase that. Dr. Inya. A bachelor's degree with biology and biochemistry from Chicago State University, a master's degree in public health from Chicago State University, and a doctorate in public health and health policy concentration from George Washington University. And he is a self-published author, indisputable. Without further ado, let's bring on my guest today, Dr. O.K. Inya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, William. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I want to thank you for appearing on the show today, and I know how busy you and the government is doing these days.
Here we go.
I'm gonna try to stay away from that, but you know that's gonna be one of my questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Blessed. A lot of good life happening, a lot of growth, and really excited for what is ahead. Despite what's happening right now, I think I will say that my 17-month-old son is a source of joy for me and my wife, and we are very intentional about our self-care and our soul care, and being focused on building a strong family. So yeah,
that's good. Now you've been married for how long?
Yeah, it'll be going on 4 years. I got married on October 23rd of 2021.
Wow, 3 days before my birthday.
Yes.
and then you had a son that's 17 months old, right?
Yes.
17 months old. What's his name?
His name is Ikenna, spelled Ikenna, and it means God's power or the Father's strength in Igbo.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm going to try to remember that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try. For the viewers out there, I've been knowing OK we used to work together at Malcolm X College, and you used to work in the PA, the physician assistant, right?
Yes.
So give us a little background about that program when you was in the physician assistant program.
Yes. So I was brought on board by Dr. Tony Monroe, who then was the president of Malcolm X College, and he asked me to help him support and build out the PA program there. And so the program was undergoing a lot of change, and I was playing a critical role in trying to recruit students and to really manage that program in a way that could get students through the pipeline to become physician assistants. And so I wore several hats. I was kind of a mentor. I was a bridge, between faculty and students. And I learned a lot about a lot of things about myself, about people, about systems, about change, about policy and politics. And, all of what I garnered from that season of my life, I was able to apply it into roles that I had subsequently. And so it definitely was a very, very challenging season. But I am a purpose-driven person, and I make every effort to glean the wisdom and the lessons, and the takeaways from every season that I, kind of walk through, and explore how I can apply those lessons going forward further. And that has been part and parcel of my approach. That's how I've moved, and and that approach has gotten me to where I am today. With my background, and experience, and the impact and the influence that I'm having now. So Yeah.
Okay. So now, when did you receive your doctor, your doctorate?
Yeah. So I earned my doctorates last January, so January of 2024.
Oh, congratulations.
Um, Thank you. And I walked the stage in May of 2024. So the way that my program did it was that if you earn a doctorate, um, and so because my my program doesn't have a convocation ceremony in the fall, um, I had while I defended my dissertation in August of 2023, my degree was conferred the following January, and then I was able to actually walk the
Walk the stage,
stage
right?
in May. So
Okay.
yeah.
So now let's
Hmm.
let's let's go back a little bit. So in high school before college, were you always interested in health science, or was it another career path and you just branched into the health career?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can recall when I was very young, maybe about 7 or 8 years old, flipping through my mother's thick science books. So because she was training as a nurse
Mm,
at that time,
hmm.
and I think that exposure coupled with my upbringing and just kind of kind of growing up in a household that valued giving back and service,
Hmm.
and also seeing whether it was uncles or aunts that were doctors, and then frankly, I didn't have a choice not to go to college, because my dad was a full professor, and my mom, had a master's degree.
Hmm.
So it was instilled in me, being the oldest of six kids, that college is a must. And so, I always, yes, I did want to become a medical doctor. And from high school through college, that was the goal.
Okay.
Um, but as things evolved, it became clear that my vision that the vision that was given me was bigger than just seeing patients as a physician.
Hmm.
And so, but yeah, it really, um, I majored in bio and
Hmm.
biochemistry, pre-med in college, with the goal of getting into med school. And so part of the experience there was that during my junior year of college, I began to prepare for the medical college admissions test. And for those who, have, taken that test or have gotten into med school or are familiar, it's a very, very challenging test.
Wow.
And I ended up taking that test four times over the better part of a decade, before finally getting into med school. And then I applied to med school four times before finally getting in. So it was no, and I, I talk about this in my book that you
Hmm.
mentioned, but
Right.
just to give you that context there.
Okay. Then the book is indispensable.
Indisputable. Yes.
Indisputable. Okay. So
Yes.
now, now, how long were you at the college?
Yeah. So I worked for 3 years. So from 2011 to 2014.
Okay. So
Yep.
now, when you left the college, where did you go from there?
Yeah. So I think it's important to add some context there because prior to, okay, all right, so let me go here. So after college, I went out into the workforce
Hmm.
and I worked for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
So I moved from Chicago um, to North Chicago to work. And so I was working as a lab scientist, as a researcher, as a technician. I kind of had like maybe three or four jobs over the
Hmm.
course of like 5 or 6 years. But I still had that interest or that passion to pursue a medical degree. And so while I was working, I was also preparing for the MCAT. And I was finally able to get, um, into med school, but that required me to take the MCAT 4 times, move from Chicago to Carbondale, Illinois for a postgrad program that also helped me to get into their med school, um, at SIU. And then, gotten, into med school. I was one of maybe 6 black men, and I think there were 4 black women out of a class of 72 students, at SIU. It was a very hostile, toxic environment. I
Wow.
didn't have the support that I needed, and so I left med school after a few years. And yes, of course, I wanted to stay, and I made every effort to do so. But even getting into med school, I knew that the vision for me was going to be bigger than seeing patients. And so while I have the experience of seeing patients as a medical student, that's something that I carry with me, and in fact is has helped shaped my my trajectory and has helped shaped part of what I'm doing right now.
Okay. Okay. Because as I was watching the news at times, because it's so depressing at times, I was like, how the senators and the representatives walking down the hall, and I was like, that is okay over there. So I got to get in contact with this brother. But that's how I
Okay.
got in contact with you because I had your number, but I
Yeah,
just wanted to get in contact with you. But
sure.
uh, yesterday, you was a moderator for a particular program that I saw.
Hmm.
Could you explain that a little bit? Talk about
Sure.
that a little
Yeah,
bit?
sure. So I've been a member of my fraternity for 27 years.
Uh huh.
I joined my fraternity when I was in college, actually. And I recently became, one of 5 deputy surgeon generals for, um, my fraternity's Surgeon General's, initiative.
Okay.
And I was able to moderate a very timely conversation that was titled "What's at Stake?" Um, exploring the future of Medicaid policy and as it relates to the health and well-being of Black men.
Mm,
And part of the context behind that is that, as I was getting so my doctoral work, my study was the first of its kind to examine the Affordable Care Act and its impact on access to care for Black men. And so, because of again my experience in college and in med school and in grad school, um, I was able to bring that to bear to moderate this very important conversation because right now, um, it, Medicaid, is on a chopping block, and
mm.
this particular program has been in place since the 1960s,
Wow.
and it is currently helping over 72 million people across the country, children, seniors, people that live with disabilities, low income people, right? And so what the current administration is doing is proposing, um, an $880 billion cut, with most of that cuts potentially coming from Medicaid, which has served as a lifeline for millions of Americans for decades,
Mm,
right? And so now, because of my unique niche and background, my goal was to focus that conversation in the context of Black men because we, are, 30% less likely than white men to be covered by insurance, and we are 25% less likely than white men to have a regular doctor to go to or to have a what's called a usual source of care. And as well, Black men have the shortest life expectancy than almost any other racial or ethnic group in the country aside from Native Americans.
mm.
And so we are as Black men, we die sooner, we have worse disparities, worse health outcomes. And then most Black men in the aggregate live in the South, where as of today, 10 states have yet to expand Medicaid. And those 10 states, I think maybe 8 out of the 10 states are in the South, where we have the worst health disparities across the board.
Wow.
And so when you kind of frame that data, those disparities in that way, like this has since been, an emergency, right?
Mm.
And so, part of what I'm trying to do is to amplify the voices of Black men and boys, and that's just one part of my work. And because of my background in government and policy and politics and research and teaching, I'm able to bring all of that to bear, to be a voice for the voices, to be someone who can put language and context to what is happening. But yes, Black and brown people definitely, but the niche as well as Black men, right? So I was honored to facilitate that panel yesterday. It was a fantastic conversation, and we laid out some actionable strategies and really kind of thought through some key issues that hopefully were well received.
Wow. So, so now I can see the bridge in the politics, and that's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why you were, I guess, lobbying the senators and congressmen was walking down the hall trying to
Yeah.
get their.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm going to talk about a few things before I get started. You just spoke on the Surgeon General initiative for Health Series, and you mentioned somewhat about the Medicaid policies and the future of the
Hmm.
Black men health. But in your title, it says Deputy Surgeon General.
Yes. So right. So the Surgeon General's initiative started uh, 5 years ago by my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, as a way to take a targeted, focused, meaningful approach to amplifying the needs of our health and well-being, not just as fraternity members, but also for people writ large. And so if we can, because, and I'll say this a lot, I say, like, our health is our wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And um, the aspect of health um, is something that I would argue undergirds a lot of other issue areas. And so I am the chair of the Health Disparities Subcommittee that sits under the Surgeon General um,
Surgeon.
uh, initiative, and I am one of 5 Deputy Surgeon Generals. And so for me, it is the health disparities, and then I have and 4 other deputies. One covers public health, another covers um family medicine, another covers um, infectious disease. Um, Another covers, I believe it is oral health. Yes, and so we want to take a comprehensive approach to addressing the unique needs of Black men's health. But also part of our goal is to educate the public about these very salient issues and the ways in which we can help to shape and influence policy in terms of how do we connect with these members of Congress and their staff to advocate for certain issues. Um, how do we engage at the local, state, and federal levels, right? Because all politics is local, and if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. And for me, given my background as a former staffer on the Hill, having worked in the House and the Senate, I typically have been one of a few conscious Black men in the room when we are negotiating bills and we're discussing specific language and narrative and data that is going into bills that get signed into law. And so, and I'll also just note that when we're talking about um, staffers of color, that um, the top Senate staff, which make up the chief of staff, the legislative director, and the communications director, those three positions, they are responsible for helping to shape policy. But as of this year, according to the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, while Black people make up about 13% of the U.S. population, Black staffers only make up about 3% of those top key positions in the Senate. And it's not much better in the House either. And so you have there are huge, long-standing disparities as it relates to trying to strengthen and lengthen the pipeline for Black and brown staffers to actually get to the Hill, to get into key positions to help shape policy. Because what I also found is that while I've had the pleasure of working with brilliant staffers who are not white, um, if my non-white colleagues don't have the experience or the nuance or the context to be able to really effectively advocate for our own unique issues as Black people. And then, which also speaks to the larger issue of structural racism and the various ways in which that manifests, right? And so yeah, so those are that is part of my experience. Those are the battles that we're fighting. Those are the numbers that we're looking at, and so I'm doing all that I can. Yeah,
And that sounds very interesting because you just mentioned 3%. Now you have 100 senators, 100
correct.
senators in the in one of those arms, and
Uh-huh.
only 3% that has the chief of staff and the top levels, and that's
Yes.
black and brown individuals,
Yes. Black staffers. Yes.
black staffers. Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Dr. OK, can you hold on for a moment? We're going to take a little small break and
Mhm.
we'll be right back with more questions because I need to ask some questions about a couple of these positions that you have held and just
Okay.
break down of some of the duties that you encounter. But we'll be
Sure.
right back after this one break. And we are back with Dr. OK Enya. As we left for a break, and I know you held many positions in the Capitol, and could you just give us a little brief uh, explanation of the National Institute of Health and maybe your senior policy advisor for the Alliance and Health Policy, and the project manager for the District of Columbia and Health Care Finance. Just give us a little history about how those roles work with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start by leading with my time on the Hill as a staffer both in the House and the Senate. So I worked for 3 members of Congress, 2 on the House side in the personal office, and then 1 on the Senate side on a committee. And so I was in Congress for a few years, and then after where I helped to draft legislation that got signed into law actually. And then when I left Congress, I went to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is the executive branch, and I worked for 4 years there. I reported to the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, and so I worked on. So if you think about hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, Zika, Ebola, things like that. I worked in that space for 4 years, and to really try to build out our national security in the context of health. And then from there, I left that role when COVID hit, actually, and I went to DC government where I worked at the local level, and I was a health reform project manager in DC government. I worked for the DC Department of Healthcare Finance, which is basically the district's Medicaid agency, and so that's where I started off kind of my journey into Medicaid, where I worked on several projects that were, centered on how do we build out the workforce in the at a very local practical level. So looking at how do we support community health workers? How do we pay them better? How do we build out the telehealth, telemedicine space? And so I wore a program officer hat as well to minister $250,000 grants to some grantees to help to operationalize telemedicine, telehealth. And then from there, I went into the not-for-profit space, where I served as a senior policy advisor for the Alliance for Health Policy, which was a nonpartisan nonprofit that served as a neutral convener of all things health policy. So I was key in bringing people to the Alliance for Health Policy in terms of experts to discuss a whole host of different types of medicine, public health, and health policy issues. And so depending on what was being discussed, what was the issue, I was helping to bring people together to discuss these issues in a very kind of nonpartisan way. And then from there, I was able to get into my current role, which is serving as the Associate Vice President for Federal Government Relations for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, where I speak on behalf of the over 1 million patients that live with MS across the country. I also have a personal connection to the MS community because I had an aunt that passed away from MS complications in 2013. And so it's of note that this is a full circle season for me because I'm now lobbying on behalf of an issue that, again, was personal in some way. And so I'm able to kind of channel my energy, channel my passions, my interests in the context of this current role, and in hopes to make things better. And again, I think it's important to note that just the stark disparities of the ways in which Black and brown patients that live with MS are treated. Black and brown patients that live with MS are diagnosed later than white patients. They die sooner than white patients. They have less access to care than white patients. And so again, this it is the health disparities, the health inequities, the structural racism, and the ways in which it manifests that is adversely impacting Black and Brown people. And so my hope is that being mission ready and being on assignments and knowing what the assignment is, that 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 is critically important. And my thing is to make it matter that I was there, right? It's to make it matter that I was there.
You know, you said several different things that caught my attention, um, and when you mentioned about um, Medicaid, how it affects over 80 plus million uh, individuals,
Hmm.
and they're talking about cutting. And
Hmm.
I know this is going to impact a lot of different cities, states, and it seems as though it's just like they don't care. And I'm not going to go
Hmm.
into the politics aspect of it, but it's sad in a sense. But
Hmm.
so on that note, would you like to leave anything? First of all, where are you from? Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born in Illinois. I
Mhm.
grew up on the south side of Chicago. My parents are from Nigeria. They live in the southwest suburbs now. I'm the oldest of six kids. I have two brothers and three sisters. Most of my siblings live in Chicago.
Mhm.
I have a brother that lives in Phoenix, Arizona. I have uncles and aunts and cousins that live in Maryland, and in Virginia, and um, so yeah.
Well, now I got to ask this question. Like I got to ask this question. Now you're working at Capitol and you see a lot.
Hmm.
You see a lot. What? Just give us a small piece. What do you? Well, I'm not going to say that part. What is it that you see that you don't think is going to improve?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question.
Yes.
So I will answer your question by framing my response in the context of history.
Okay.
I am an ardent student of history, and what I know is that each generation will have their own unique battles to fight. My thing is, my heart is that I'm here for a reason, for a purpose, and part of the question for me is, how can I make this world, this place, this person better than how I found it
Right.
in some way, shape, or form, right? That's part of what helps to keep me grounded despite all of the current chaos and confusion. And as I shared with you before we came on, I said, look, so, you do have to be wired and built to work in this type and be effective in this type of environment,
Right.
right?
That's true.
And
That's so
so,
true.
for me, it's about moving differently and having a different perspective and actually meeting the chaos with calm, knowing that while there are certainly very unique things that are transpiring in this current time and season that we're in, looking over the arc of history, we know that there's a swing, right? So there's a season, some years where it's one way, and then it swings back the other way, right? And so that is so. In fact, if you think about it, anytime there has been meaningful racial progress for Black people, there has always been that white backlash. If you think about um, the Reconstruction era,
Mm-hmm.
the when Black people actually began to build and to grow and to, kind of move um, beyond slavery and Jim Crow, there was backlash. You think about Tulsa, Oklahoma, with Black Wall Street, right? you think about the race riots, you think about uh, the civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what followed then, and then you think about the more contemporary Black Lives Matter movement with
Mm.
George Floyd, and you're seeing now in this current era the 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 backlash, the pushback, the intentional erasure of history, the whitewashing of history, dismantling whole government systems, dismantling the Department of Education, which, as we all know, education is a fundamental driver of health outcomes and a whole host of other outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'll try to put like a positive spin on this to say that while right now lives are being lost, we had COVID, so there's a lot, right? But and we want to be empathetic with the grieving, with the loss, with the chaos, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, if if we so part of it is, let's not waste this time. Let's be intentional about how do we strategize, how do we think through, how do we plan, what is our agenda as Black people,
Mm-hmm.
right? In fact, in the fall of 2024, when Kamala Harris was running for president, she had proposed an opportunity agenda for Black men. Now, given the fact that she had proposed and was intentional about focusing on Black men, I took that as an opportunity to lend my voice and support to what she had proposed. And so what I did was, again, given all of my background, right, government, policy, politics, et cetera, research, I did a brain dump and I drafted up over the course of like a week, 2 weeks, what I'm framing as a John Henry health equity playbook, a 4-year health policy agenda for Black men. And I'm currently working with some colleagues to iterate on that playbook, and to I'm looking to socialize it with key stakeholders and partners and colleagues when I launch it at some point this fall, um, to ensure that for next year when midterms come around, enough people have seen this playbook, they see the content, it to build a movement. And then, of course, I'm thinking about 2028 when I'll say it here, and it'll go on record that that a Democrat will win the White House in
Mm-hmm.
2028. So
Mm-hmm.
you can put like it's on record. This is live. Um, and so, but my point is that while we are currently in this current space, let's be intentional about doing all that we know that we can do now, and actually make civic engagements just part of the culture. Let's vote in every election every time. Let's not wait to vote during midterms. Let's not wait to vote for the president. Let's actually create a culture of engagement and voter education so that and I'll say it this way. Um you if you allow people um to play the game, you you are giving up your voice, your power. Um, if you, because again, you are dealing with, and I get it, right? You're talking about apathy and like all of these things. Why should we vote? Why and I get it, but part of what I'm doing now is how can I make this content in this playbook or just in general, how can I make it relevant and connect the dots between why it's important for you to attend that local council member meeting or visit that state lawmaker's office for months at a time to build a relationship. Why is it important for you to email or call that member of Congress or build that relationship with those key stakeholders? You know, and which also actually is getting to my second book that I'm going to write very soon, which is centered on helping people shape policy at the local, state, and federal levels. Why? Because given my background and experience, and I've traveled around the country and I've been on panels, on podcasts, and conferences, et cetera, there is a significant knowledge gap about what the policymaking process entails. And because I have lived it and I see it and I'm doing it now, I'm going to do a brain dump and write that second book so that I can go out on a book tour and and share this information, especially for my people, to at least at the end of the day, I know that I've done my part to help to advance the movement on behalf of Black and brown people.
Well, you said a lot, and I hope the individuals or the viewers are listening to what you're saying, because basically the Democrats said this before the election, but people were blindsided. They didn't care. They were just focusing on whatever. But Dr. OK Inya, I appreciate you coming on the program today and giving us some of your insight. I would like for you to come back once things start dying down a little bit and share some more of your wisdom on the Capitol, Capitol, and give us some, because that number with the 80 million plus with the Medicare, that's alarming to me. But
yes.
We're gonna see. But once again, thank you for coming on, and feel free to come back anytime.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Look forward to it.
All right, thank you. Well, you heard it there first. My guest, Dr. OK Inya. And I want to thank his wife for allowing him to come on the program, and his 17-year-old month child. You know what I mean. Okay, my next week guest is, I would like everybody to really tune in, because next week I have a special guest, Brian R. Jones. He's going to come and talk about OSA, obstructive sleep. He has a story to share, and for individuals who don't know about OSA, I should have asked Dr. OK about this, but for people who don't know about this, it's during sleep when leading to a pause of your breath. And Brian will speak on something that he experienced and what he had to go through to overcome that, in which he's still recovering from it. But please tune in next week and you can hear his story. Okay, before we leave, I'm always going to leave with a Bible verse. And my Bible verse comes from Isaiah 41:10. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. That's my Bible verse for this week. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching another exciting episode, and I want to thank my guest, Dr. OK Inya, for appearing. And also remember, I want everybody to be safe this weekend. Have a nice weekend. Until next week, you guys be blessed. Good night.